Live in Studio B with your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton alongside Jarom Jordan.
Yeah, as we mentioned this week, ESPNU and SiriusXM will be holding a virtual pep rally featuring BYU in Western Kentucky. Nicole Auerbach is a senior college football writer for The Athletic and will host the pep rally. I spoke to her earlier this morning on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. All right, Nicole, in a pandemic, we've had to figure out how to do different things. Pep rallies are one of them. Tell us how you're going to have a virtual pep rally that involves BYU in Western Kentucky.
Well, very excited for this. I think it's going to be the appropriate level of absurd for it being a pep rally that we are all doing from home. We are going to do it over Zoom, like pretty much everything these days. The mascots will be involved, athletic directors from both sides will be involved, and fans too. And so, I think it's just about trying to get some excitement for a game with these two fan bases now suddenly have a history together thanks to, a mascot poll in the pandemic. And I bet that would have actually manifested with fans going to a game, right? Like you would go to a place you're never going to play at otherwise. And so you don't have that this year. And so I think anything that can kind of, connect people and have a space to talk about it, does that. And I think, the game was scheduled before we knew how good BYU is going to be this year. And I think that adds something to it, although I'm sure the Western Kentucky fans would rather go back to a mascot competition perhaps than maybe football right now. But I think it's going to be really fun. And, we'll see if that type of event actually works and is fun and enjoyable. Maybe that is something that can be added towards some of the bigger games this year because without tailgating, without pep rallies, without those things, it does feel like something is missing.
Yeah, that sense of community is really important. It's coming up Thursday night, October 29th, 7 Eastern. You can find out more information on SiriusXM.com/pep rally. And like you said, this game does not happen without the SiriusXM poll, so thank you for that, which is great. What did you think of that poll during the summer when it came down to these two mascots, Cosmo and Big Red, two of the best in the country?
Yeah, first of all, they are two of the best mascots in the entire country. But I was shocked because I thought, one of the big blue blood programs that has a zillion alumni would take over this poll, right? I mean, this was a really good indication and reminder about how dedicated and diehard these types of fan bases are. Because if I'm remembering correctly, these were play-in mascots. These were 16 seed mascots. So this was a sustained commitment from these fan bases over a period of days to get them to this point. Obviously, the very controversial, finish and whether or not votes were bought. Honestly, this got me through an entire week of early quarantine when there was nothing to do. I was just glued to this mascot debate. It was actually quite hilarious.
Yes, B-O-T, I think is the appropriate spelling on that. So BYU and Western Kentucky are going to match up. And again, this game doesn't happen, I think, without that contest because then the two ADs are publicly talking about getting a game. And then here we are on Halloween, BYU and Western Kentucky. Certainly, both teams are not what we thought they'd be at this point. Western Kentucky, a 9-4 team, have struggled 2-4, survived against Chattanooga after a crazy finish where they run back a kick return for a touchdown, but the up back calls a fair catch. They bring it back. BYU 6-0 and ranked 11th. So what do you think of the matchup Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it'll necessarily be all that close. I think personally, I think BYU is head and shoulders above Western Kentucky. It does seem like one of those years for them where things aren't going right and they got to work through some stuff. That place, it's interesting because you've seen a number of head coaches kind of use it as a springboard, and you have seen other head coaches struggle at times. It can be really great, but you can also go through these growing pains. But on the other hand, BYU has just been one of the biggest stories in the country this year. And I think, the way that they have been in our TVs on our, just kind of in our collective awareness is because they've been playing a lot, right? They've had Friday night games. They've had these time slots where they were the only show in town. And I think people really bought into Zach Wilson and this offense. I mean, you're hearing him as a Heisman contender. And these are things that don't normally happen. It actually feels like one of those years where there is more respect for the group of five than ever. And I sort of wonder if it's because they started to play first. Maybe that contributed to it. But if you look at the top 25 polls, you look at the way people are talking about both BYU and Cincinnati, I think you feel that. And so I think, obviously we would have loved to see BYU, this team, play against its original schedule, but Tom Holmoe did an incredible job building a schedule out of nowhere, basically had 1.5 games from the original schedule left there. And in providing, competition to the point where, again, we're really excited about this team. And we also know they've got Boise State and San Diego State and some teams that got added late that really can provide an opportunity to, talk about a New Year's Six Bowl if you go undefeated, or at least measure out, and we can see where this BYU team is, even though their schedule didn't have and couldn't have any Power 5 opponents this year.
Yeah, it's the thing I've been talking about for a couple of years, which has been interesting. I've been saying, I don't know why BYU is playing these tough schedules. I don't know what the point is. If you don't win 10+, you're just not relevant. And here BYU sits, obviously an easier schedule, 6-0, and you wrote an article during the summer about, like you said 1.5 games, right? It was Houston and North Alabama. Houston moves to a road game. BYU survives that and thrives in that, coming back down late. North Alabama, the FCS team. Tom Holmoe had to make up the schedule. You talked to him and wrote an article, and here BYU is thriving in that schedule. What do you think of the job Tom Holmoe did to just get a schedule together, which is now up to 10 games?
Yeah, I think it's remarkable because if that were me, he was talking about like sleepless nights and, feeling better about things one day and worse about everything the next. Like, it would have been so close to not play, to just fold it in. I mean, they were essentially the only team out west that was trying to play, and until the Pac-12 decided to come back and the Mountain West decided to come back, it looked like they were going to be going at it alone. And it is remarkable that they found people to play. They made it work. They even had the luxury of, a couple of bye games that they could offer. So they were able to bring people to Provo. There were a lot of different pieces that he walked me through, along with Dave Brown, who's the scheduling guru who helped him here. And it is remarkable. And even in that conversation, which we talked would have had to been the end of August, early September, right before the Navy game, he was saying that he was hopeful, but didn't want to jinx it, that he could add more games. And we've seen that. We've seen games get added since. So again, it's the best case scenario, because when you have power leagues going conference only, which all of them did, except, you got the one exception in the Big 12, one in the ACC, but there's restrictions on where the games can be played. It's totally limiting. But it is interesting, because I think in normal years, you want the quality of the opponent. You do want those Power 5 opponents, the name brands. You want to be considered a program like that. But we are seeing this year the benefit of not playing a totally brutal schedule, because like you said, I mean, they're undefeated. We're talking about them. You have a Heisman contender in quarterback. I don't know if that happens if you've lost 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been calling for about 3 Power 5s, plus Boise State, and throw in Cincinnati and or USF, where there's still some good games. So we'll see what BYU does moving forward. But next year they have 7 Power 5s, and we'll see if Zach Wilson comes back for his senior year, which brings us to the Wilson topic. You mentioned he's in a Heisman candidacy right now. What have you thought of his junior season and the potential for him to be a Heisman candidate at the end and or high draft pick?
I think he's been insanely fun to watch, and just really enjoyable. I think it's hard for someone in his shoes to actually win the Heisman, as we all know. I mean, we've seen so many times where it's the quarterback of, a team that's playing in the national championship game or whatever it might be. And I think that, for him, though, I think there's absolutely a chance that he can become a finalist and earn a trip to New York, assuming that they do trips to New York this year, based on, his numbers alone and being in the national spotlight. That is the key when you are a group of 5 player, or just outside of the Power 5, because he's not technically either. But outside of the spotlight of the Alabamas and Clemsons, this is just a tough year because, it's Trevor Lawrence, it's Justin Fields, Mac Jones is kind of getting in that mix too. But to me, there's no reason that he can't be a finalist. And you've got to think that his draft stock is improving as well, because again, he's become must-see TV. His skill set is interesting. And, this is just, the NFL is changing. And they go for guys that look like him and play like him. So I think it's going to be really fun to follow along. And I do hope that, he's able to get a trip to New York, because I always love when you get someone who's like a defensive player or, a running back or receiver, someone not a quarterback from Alabama or Clemson, just anyone who's outside of that mold, from non-traditional places that we haven't seen in a while. Obviously, BYU has this history, of the passing attack and so many influential moments in college football history. I think it's cool to have a BYU quarterback back in these types of conversations.
Indeed, it is a restoration of the brand, if you will, and the philosophy. We're talking with Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic and SiriusXM ESPNU pep rally coming up on Thursday night. Let's talk about BYU's schedule. So if they go 10-0 and have a win against Boise State, which you think would be the best win on the schedule, is that enough to be a New Year's Six at large?
It would depend on everyone else. And I know that's not a fun answer, but the problem with projecting these things out is that, nothing happens in a vacuum. So you need to be, they can't qualify for the group of 5 champion spot, because that is specifically a conference champion. So it's a little bit similar to the way we think about Notre Dame making the 4-team college football playoff is, you have to be unequivocally better than others. So they're going to need one of the at-large spots for New Year's Six Bowl, which I think is possible. I absolutely think that is possible. And I think that there would be people pushing for that. And part of that is, like you mentioned, a win over Boise State, the amount of respect that would demand. I think it's possible, but it will depend on how the group of 5 races shake out, where those teams are slotted, and you go from there. But again, you're going to have a luxury of maybe get more games played than some other leagues and some other potential candidate at large teams. Plus, again, this year is just going to be so subjective with fewer data points. That the eye test matters. And the fact that we like watching BYU, we have a lot of respect for this offense. We've seen them a lot. These are things that could end up mattering with a human selection committee.
Do you feel like BYU, with the risk reward of potentially blowing up that opportunity or helping themselves, that it'd be worth it to add a Marshall who has November 28th open, for example?
It's an interesting question. Marshall's a really good team. And it could be. I think it's hard to tell, right? Because we don't know how many games everyone else is going to get through. And you also don't really know what's going to happen, let's say, with Cincinnati. Are they really going? My colleague Chris Vanini wrote this week that they should be college football playoff consideration.
Whoa.
If they go up into that mix, what does that mean for the New Year's Six spots, right? So it's definitely, there's still moving pieces and ways to figure that out. So it's a little too early to predict anything like that. But I do love the idea of a game against Marshall. I think that's also a really fun team this year.
Could be fun, potentially a ranked matchup late in the season, a bracket buster, if you will. Let's finish with this, Nicole. How do people sign up to participate in the pep rally Thursday?
Yeah, so it's through SiriusXM. We are sponsoring it and, figuring out the tickets. So if you go to the SiriusXM College Twitter account, they will have links and everything you need to know to join us. But we want fans from both sides, but especially diehard BYU fans to join in. We're going to have Cosmo there. We're going to have the athletic director, Tom Holmoe, and it should be a good time.
It's Thursday night, 7 Eastern. Nicole, great stuff. We appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Anytime.